Thunder cracks like a whip over the Mississippi Delta, splitting the night into shards of blue fire. The rain comes heavy, thick as poured oil beating against the corrugated tin of the mill roof. Inside, men move like shadows, bare backs glistening, hands slick with molasses and sweat. The air hums with the constant groan of the sugar mill, its gears grinding through cane and time. Then, without warning, a single shriek of metal tears through the noise, a groan, a choke, and then silence. The heart of the plantation stops breathing. The overseer shouts from the doorway, his lantern swinging like a mad pendulum. "Keep it turning." But the gears don't listen. The great flywheel quivers once, then falls still. The belts hang limp, dripping black oil. In that instant, even the rain seems to hold its breath. Somewhere in the shadows, a worker mutters, "The heart's gone cold." The overseer storms across the floor, boots slapping wet boards. Who touched the valves? Who slowed her down? No one answers. Dozens of men stand frozen, faces pale with fear and exhaustion. The overseer's whip curls in his hand like a living thing. His eyes dart between them, searching for guilt, for tremor, for truth. Levi stands among them, quiet, his eyes fixed on the stopped machine. The lantern light glints across his cheekbones, his jaw tight as iron. No emotion shows there, just a stillness that doesn't belong in a man afraid. His hands hang at his sides, stained with grease. Inside, his pulse beats steady. He knows what the others don't. He knows why the heart has stopped. The master arrives minutes later, his carriage wheels splashing through the mud. He bursts into the mill, the smell of whiskey and cigar smoke following him. "What's the meaning of this?" he roars. The overseer stammers. Something broke. Something's jammed. "It'll be running by dawn," he promises. But Levi knows it won't. Not this time. The damage runs deeper than bolts and steel. Lightning flares again, revealing the machine's innards, a monstrous skeleton of cogs, belts, and chains. The flywheel's teeth are cracked clean through. Not worn, not rusted, broken, precise. It takes skill to do that kind of harm. Levi looks away before anyone notices the faint trace of a smile in his eyes. The night drags on. The workers are ordered to stay, to strip the machine, to work until it turns again. But nothing moves. The overseer curses, slams tools against the iron. "It's cursed," one man whispers. The word hangs in the thick, sweet air. Cursed. Maybe he's right. Maybe the curse has a name. Outside, the rain eases into a whisper, the wind sighing through the cane. The plantation house glows faintly on the hill, a white ghost watching over the ruin below. Levi wipes his hands on his trousers, slow, deliberate. He glances once at the broken gear, the jagged edge that caught the light just so. And in that reflection, he sees it clearly, the first breath of freedom disguised as failure. The overseer's lantern flickers low, the flame struggling against the damp. He spits into the mud, mutters about devils, and orders everyone out. "We start again at dawn," he growls. The men shuffle away, tired and beaten, their chains clinking like sad music. Levi lingers a moment longer, staring into the dark belly of the mill. Somewhere deep inside the wreckage, a single droplet of oil falls, soft, perfect, final. The heart has stopped. And Levi, the man no one sees, the man no one knows, stands in that silence like a ghost who finally found his breath. By dawn, the mill lies quiet under a shroud of mist. The air tastes like rust and sugar, heavy with the scent of something gone wrong. Men shuffle in half awake, eyes hollow from the storm and the overseer's wrath. They step around the twisted remains of iron and splintered belts as if passing a grave. The master's voice echoes from outside, sharp, angry, desperate. "Find who did it," he says. "Find who broke my mill." Inside, tools clatter, chains rattle, and fear tightens the room. No one speaks above a whisper. The mill was their life, their prison, their heartbeat. To see it still is to see something sacred defiled. The overseer paces between them, a coiled snake ready to strike. "Some fool was in here last night," he growls. "Someone thought they could play with God's work." Levi stands at the far end, near the shattered gear teeth. His eyes trace the jagged edges, the delicate fractures hidden among years of wear. It's a beautiful sight, ugly only to the men who profit from its turning. The overseer's voice booms behind him. "You there, gear boy, you see anything strange?" Levi turns, slow, steady. "Nothing, sir," he says, his tone flat, his face unreadable. "Just looks tired is all." The overseer steps close enough that Levi can smell the whiskey on his breath. "Tired?" he repeats, eyes narrowing. Machines don't get tired, men do. And when men get tired, they make mistakes. Levi nods once, respectful, but says nothing more. The overseer waits for a flicker, a tremor, a lie, but finds only stillness. Hours pass. The engineer, a red-faced man from Natchez, kneels beside the wreckage, wiping soot from the metal. She didn't just fail, he mutters. She was broken from the inside. The master frowns. Sabotage? The engineer hesitates, then nods. Looks that way. The word spreads like poison through the ranks. Sabotage. Every worker stiffens. Some cross themselves. Others glance nervously at Levi. When the master leaves, the whispers grow louder. They'll hang someone for this. Ain't no one safe. Better speak before they pick at random. Levi says nothing. He knows what silence can do. It draws suspicion and fear, but also power. He wipes his hands, the oil smearing into dark fingerprints that fade as quickly as they form. By evening, the overseer orders them to clear the wreckage. Iron shrieks against the dirt as the men drag the broken pieces into piles. The setting sun paints everything in copper and fire. Levi works slow, deliberate, his muscles aching with every lift. He feels the weight of what he's done, not as guilt, but as consequence. Freedom, he knows, is never quiet. It comes dressed in smoke and ruin. As the others leave, Levi lingers again. He crouches near the gear, running his thumb along a hairline crack no one else noticed. It's the one he filed himself. So small, so perfect. The first domino in a chain of destruction. He feels the edge cut his skin, a whisper of blood mixing with oil. He doesn't flinch. Behind him, the overseer's lantern flickers to life again. "Still here?" he asks, voice low, suspicious. Levi straightens, wipes his hands and nods. "Didn't want to leave her alone," he says. The overseer grunts, steps closer, and stares into the broken machine. "She's seen better days," he says. Levi's mouth curls slightly. "So have we all." The overseer chuckles, a dry, humorless sound, and walks away, leaving the smell of tobacco hanging in the air. Levi waits until his footsteps fade, then leans close to the ruined gears. "Rest now," he whispers under his breath. "You've done your part." Outside, night gathers again. The fields hum with crickets, and the wind carries the faint echo of the mill's last breath. Somewhere in the darkness, the master drinks and curses, the overseer schemes, and pray for mercy. But Levi just listens, to the silence, to the peace between the storms. He knows the machine's death is only the beginning. Before Levi ever touched a broken gear, he was a man of tools and patience. Years ago, before the chains, he worked in the shipyards near New Orleans, where engines sang and men talked in the rhythm of steel. He was young then, full of questions, his fingers always tracing the lines of a wheel or a hinge, learning how things moved, how power flowed through pressure and timing. Mechanics was language to him, and he spoke it better than any overseer ever spoke command. But that was before debt, before betrayal, before he was sold to a man who saw only muscle, not mind. Now the same hands that once built engines of progress turned the wheels of someone else's profit. He fixed what others broke. He built what others burned. Yet inside him, something still calculated, precise as a clock's tick. He remembered every motion, every gear, every weak link. In the long, humid nights of the quarters, when the others whispered prayers, Levi sat in silence. He'd draw shapes in the dirt with a stick, circles, teeth, levers, designs that would never see paper. "You thinking again, Levi?" an old man once asked, leaning in the dim glow of the fire. Levi's answer came soft. "I'm remembering." The old man smiled a sad smile. "Ain't much use for remembering here." Levi's eyes didn't leave the dirt. Maybe not yet. His reputation grew among the others. When a wagon broke, they called for Levi. When a door jammed or a plow froze, he fixed it with nothing but wire and will. The overseer took pride in his skill, called him a good hand, even laughed sometimes, like he owned the mind behind the labor. But every good job was another nail in Levi's resolve. He'd nod, quiet, obedient, all the while mapping every mechanism he touched. One day, while repairing a gear axle inside the mill, Levi overheard the master talking. "Without that mill," the man said, "we'd be nothing but dirt farmers again." The words echoed in Levi's skull. Without the mill, nothing. He repeated it to himself, slow, tasting the weight of it. The thought burned through him like whiskey, dangerous and sweet. Later, while the others hauled cane in the burning sun, Levi slipped inside the mill again. He traced the massive wheel's rim, feeling the heat it carried from endless turning. The sound of metal against metal pulsed like a living heart. He studied the joints, the seams, the tiny places where too much friction could breed collapse. Every detail he stored away, like secrets whispered by the iron itself. That night the moon hung over the delta like a pale coin. The air smelled of wet sugar and decay. Levi lay awake, staring at the rafters. The old man across from him murmured through dreams, calling for mercy. Levi turned his face toward the window slats, where faint lightning flickered beyond the trees. He whispered to no one, "Mercy, don't build freedom." Days blurred into weeks. The overseer grew more restless, snapping his whip faster, barking harder. Production lagged. The broken mills slowed their wealth to a crawl. Levi kept his head down, worked when told, but his mind was somewhere else, inside the gears, inside the turning teeth of justice. One evening, a young worker named Jonah approached him. "You ever think of running?" Jonah whispered. Levi didn't look up from the metal shard he was polishing. "Run where?" Jonah shrugged. "Anywhere but here." Levi's jaw tightened. "Running don't end it, it just moves it." Jonah frowned. "So what do you want to do?" Levi paused, then lifted his gaze. "Stop it." Jonah laughed, a nervous sound. "Stop what?" Levi's eyes flicked toward the mill, where lanterns burned against the dusk. "The machine." Jonah followed his stare, then looked back at Levi with confusion and fear. "You mean break it?" Levi didn't answer. He didn't have to. The overseer's voice carried across the mill yard like a whip cracking through the air. "Move, you lazy dogs," he barked, the words soaked in whiskey and cruelty. His name was Carter, a man who smiled only when something bled. He strutted between the rows of workers, boots sinking into the mud, eyes sharp for weakness. The cane fields glowed gold in the noon sun, but under that light, everything felt like punishment. Levi worked in silence, his shirt clinging to his back, sweat tracing the scars that crossed his shoulders. The overseer stopped beside him, resting a hand on the coiled whip at his belt. "You got clever hands, gear boy," Carter said. "I seen how you look at that mill like it's your woman." Levi didn't lift his eyes. "Just doing what I'm told, sir." Carter chuckled, a sound like gravel. "You keep those hands busy, and maybe you'll see another harvest." The laughter faded as he moved down the line, but his words stayed. Levi's jaw clenched. Every insult, every lash, every laugh, it was all part of the same rhythm, the same endless turning of the machine. But deep down, Levi had already begun to change the beat. That evening, when the field lamps burned low and the workers trudged back toward the quarters, Levi lingered by the mill. The building loomed in the twilight, a hulking beast of wood and metal. He stepped inside, where the smell of oil and damp sugar hung thick. The echo of Carter's laughter still haunted the air. Levi touched the gears, feeling the cold bite of steel against his fingers. He whispered under his breath, "You ain't theirs. Not anymore." From the darkness another voice answered. "Talking to ghosts again, Levi?" It was Miriam, one of the field women. Her face glistened with sweat, her hands calloused from the cane. She leaned against the doorway, watching him. "You spend more time in here than you do breathing fresh air." Levi turned, head toward her, eyes steady. "Fresh air don't change nothing." She stepped closer, her tone low. "Carter's been talking. Says he don't trust you. Says you're thinking too much." Levi smirked. "A man's got to think, or he ain't a man." Miriam frowned. "You keep thinking, and he'll make sure you ain't anything at all." For a moment, silence filled the mill. The only sound was the slow drip of oil onto the floorboards. Levi looked up at the massive wheel above them, the chain of gears locked in place. "Every machine's got a weak link," he said softly. "Every man does too." Miriam's eyes widened as she caught his meaning. "Levi," she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "You ain't talking about—" "I'm talking about stopping this," he interrupted. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "You see those chains? They ain't just on us. They're in that thing. That's what feeds them. That's what owns us." She shook her head. "You break that mill and they'll kill us all. They already are. Levi said quietly. Just slow. Miriam looked away, her hands trembling. You're going to get yourself hanged. Maybe, he replied. But maybe that's the price. The lantern flickered between them, casting long shadows across the gears. For the first time she saw something in his face that scared her more than death. Resolve. The kind of resolve that doesn't fade with warning or fear. She turned to leave, her voice barely a whisper. You're playing with fire. Levi's gaze followed the wheel's still spokes. Good, he said. Let it burn. Later that night, as the others slept, Levi sat alone outside the quarters. The cicadas sang loud, the air thick with heat and silence. He watched lightning dance in the distant clouds and thought of Carter's grin, the master's commands, the endless grind of the mill. Each thought was a spark, each memory, a drop of oil. He looked down at his hat, hands rough and scarred, and flexed them slowly. You've built their world long enough, he murmured. Time to take it apart. In the dark, the plan began to take shape. Small, quiet, invisible. He would watch, learn, wait. Every turn of the wheel brought him closer. Every insult sharpened his resolve. And somewhere inside that vast machine, death was already waiting for his touch. The nights grew longer and the air heavier. The mill stood silent still, awaiting its rebirth. By day, the workers cleared debris, hauling splintered beams and shattered gears beneath the punishing sun. By night, the silence hummed like a warning. In that quiet, Levi worked, not with tools of iron but with memory and precision. He waited until the moon climbed high before leaving his cot. The camp slept, exhausted, snoring through the humidity. Levi moved like a shadow between the cabins, carrying nothing but a broken nail and a stick of chalk. Inside the mill, the air was cold, the echo of his footsteps soft and measured. He crouched near the ruined machinery and began to draw. In the thin film of dust on the floor, he traced the skeleton of the mill as he remembered it, each wheel, each belt, each pivot point. His hand moved quickly, steady, as if guided by something deeper than thought. The drawing grew, circles, lines, ratios, like a map of vengeance. He paused only to listen for footsteps, then continued. By the time the first light touched the horizon, a full plan covered the floor. It wasn't random, it wasn't rage, it was geometry, a design for collapse. He'd found where the torque was strongest, where the gears interlocked under tension. He knew now exactly which piece to wound, which tooth to fracture so the damage would look accidental, but irreversible. That morning, Carter found him near the water trough, wiping oil from his fingers. "You been up all night?" the overseer demanded. Levi looked up, eyes tired but sharp. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Too hot." Carter squinted, suspicious, but didn't press. "Well, since you're awake, the master wants this thing turning again. You're going to help the engineer get her running." Levi nodded, his voice steady. "Yes, sir." It was the chance he needed. Inside the mill, the engineer barked orders. "Clean that axle, tighten that bolt, grease the wheel." Levi obeyed, hands moving in practiced rhythm, but as he worked he slipped small changes into place. A wedge here, barely noticeable. A screw tightened too far. A notch filed thin beneath the gear tooth where no eye would ever look. Every motion was deliberate, every movement quiet as breath. When the engineer's back was turned, Levi pressed his thumb over the weakened gear, feeling the slight give beneath the metal. "One turn," he whispered. "Just one." At sundown, the test began. The engine coughed, groaned, then roared to life. The belt snapped into motion, flinging droplets of oil into the air. Carter shouted in triumph, "She's alive again!" The workers clapped, half in relief, half in fear. The master smiled wide, clapping Carter on the shoulder. "Good work, boy," he said to Levi. Levi nodded, his face expressionless. Inside, his heart beat like a drum. The wheel turned smooth, steady. The vibrations echoed through the floor. But Levi heard something beneath it, a faint, uneven rhythm, the whisper of weakness. He could almost feel the strain, like a held breath waiting to break. That night, when the yard emptied, Levi returned once more. The moon hung low and red. He knelt beside the spinning monster, his reflection warping in the metal's motion. "You'll fall apart soon," he said softly. "And when you do, no man alive will fix you." Behind him, footsteps crunched on gravel. Miriam's voice, low and trembling. "You did something, didn't you?" Levi didn't answer. She stepped closer, eyes wide with fear. "Levi, Tell me you didn't. He stood, turning toward her. It's all ret. 80 done. Her breath caught. They'll kill everyone when they find out. They already kill us, he said, his voice calm, distant. At least this way, something dies that deserves it. Miriam's eyes filled with tears. You think this'll change anything? Levi looked past her, toward the horizon where thunderclouds gathered again. It'll start something, he murmured. The wind rose, whistling through the broken boards of the mill. The great wheel groaned as it turned, slow and heavy. For a moment, Levi imagined it screaming. He placed a hand on the trembling frame, feeling its pulse like a dying beast's heart. Tomorrow, it would break. Tomorrow, the machine that owned them all would destroy itself. Levi closed his eyes, listening to the rhythm of rain returning in the distance. A smile ghosted across his face. Tired, grim, inevitable. You build it up, he whispered to the storm. Then you watch it fall. Dawn broke with a strange stillness. The air was heavy, swollen with heat and waiting. The plantation stirred, roosters crowed, pots clattered, the rhythm of labor returning as though nothing had changed. But beneath it all, the mill's deep hum rose again, the heart of the plantation pulsing once more. Levi walked among the others toward the yard, sweat already slicking his neck. The overseer barked, "Get those carts moving. Sugar don't press itself." Men lifted, strained, grunted beneath sacks of cane, their hands raw and their backs bent in the same eternal rhythm. But Levi's eyes were not on the work, they were on the mill. Inside, the machinery thundered to life, belts snapping, iron screaming, steam curling in white ghosts from the vents. The engineer grinned proudly. "Told ya, she's good as new." Carter spat into the dirt and folded his arms. "Let's see how long she holds." Levi stood nearby, pretending to tighten a bolt, his pulse loud in his ears. The great wheel turned faster, the gears meshed, the teeth clanked in perfect rhythm. Then, faintly, he heard it, the uneven thrum he'd planted days before, a hiccup in the heartbeat. Miriam passed, said by, eyes darting toward him. Her lips moved silently. "Don't do this." Levi didn't look at her. His hands worked automatically, his face blank, but his gaze fixed on the trembling gear deep inside the machine's chest. The sun rose higher, the air shimmered. Workers fed cane stalks into the grinder, their songs low and broken. The overseer laughed, swatting a man who slowed down. And then, something shifted. A sharp metallic snap, so small it might have been nothing. The engineer frowned. "Did you hear?" Another snap. The wheel jolted. Belts whipped. A shriek of grinding metal tore through the air like a scream. Then came the explosion. A burst of iron and steam erupted from the mill's heart. Shards of metal flew like bullets. Workers dove for the ground. The overseer's lantern shattered, flame leaping to spilled oil. The engineer shouted, "Shut it down!" But the mechanism had already gone mad, gears spinning wild, tearing themselves apart. Levi didn't move. He stood frozen, watching as the thing that had devoured their lives tore itself open. The great wheel twisted off its axle, spinning sideways before slamming into the floor. The walls shook. The roof split. A cloud of steam swallowed everything. When the noise finally died, silence fell like ash. Only the crackle of fire remained. Carter lay bleeding near the door, his leg pinned beneath a beam. The engineer's body was nowhere to be seen. Levi blinked through the smoke. Miriam's voice broke through the chaos. "Levi!" She was alive, cut on the forehead but standing. She stumbled toward him, grabbing his arm. "You gotta go." He didn't move. He just stared at the twisted heap that once was the mill. The gears lay scattered like bones. The belts hung limp. The air reeked of burnt oil and death. Miriam shook him hard. "They'll come, Levi. They'll think it was us." He turned slowly, eyes empty. "It was us." He did. A gunshot cracked from outside. The plantation guards had arrived, drawn by the noise. Voices shouted orders. "Find them. Find out what happened." Levi and Miriam ran, through smoke and sugarcane, through the fields that smelled of ash and blood. Behind them, the mill still hissed, its dying breaths echoing through the valley. They ducked behind a collapsed fence. Miriam gasped, her dress torn, her hands shaking. "You killed them," she whispered. "You killed them all." Levi's voice was low, steady. "No, the machine killed them. I just showed it how." Thunder rolled across the horizon again, deep, distant, like the echo of a god laughing. The rain began to fall, heavy and hard, washing soot from his hands. In the distance, fire spread across the fields. The plantation was burning. The overseer's shouts faded beneath the roar of the storm. Levi stared back once, at the mill's corpse glowing red through the rain. He whispered to it, almost gently, "Now you know how it feels to break." Then he turned, took Miriam's trembling hand, and disappeared into the dark trees where the rain swallowed their footsteps. Night closed in on the Mississippi Delta like a damp, suffocating shroud. The rain had stopped, but the smoke lingered, thick, oily, rising from the blackened ribs of the sugar mill. The plantation slept uneasily. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind, sounded like accusation. Somewhere out there 2 people had vanished into the swamp, and the masters wanted blood. In the cane fields, search lanterns bobbed like restless ghosts. Dogs barked, straining against their leashes. "Ain't no way they got far," the overseer growled, limping on a wounded leg wrapped in bloodied cloth. "You find that boy, you bring me his hands first." His voice was raw, half with pain, half with rage. But deep beyond the tree line, where the earth turned to black water and frogs croaked under the stars, Levi and Miriam crouched in the mud. The night pressed close, full of insect hum and the distant echo of men shouting his name. Levi's clothes were torn, his arms streaked with soot. Miriam sat beside him, silent, her breathing shallow. She whispered, "They'll kill everyone, Levi, not just us. The field hands, the children, anyone they think helped." Levi's eyes glinted faintly in the moonlight. "They were already dying, Miriam, just slower." Her voice cracked. "You don't understand what comes next. They'll call in the riders, the kind who burn first, ask later." He said nothing. He could hear them too, the distant hoofbeats, faint but closing. He knew the swamp would only hide them for a while. A bullfrog croaked nearby. Fireflies pulsed over the stagnant pools. Levi stared into the water, his reflection trembling. "I didn't want to kill them," he said quietly. "Just stop the wheel. Just make it stop turning." Miriam turned to him, eyes shining with fear and pity. "And now it's stopped. But you can't stay here. You gotta find somewhere they can't reach you." Levi wiped a streak of soot across his face, his jaw set. "Where's that, Miriam? Ain't no place they don't reach." The sound of dogs grew closer. He grabbed her hand. "Come on!" They waded deeper into the swamp, branches snagging their clothes, mud sucking at their feet. The smell of decay was thick. Somewhere behind, men shouted, "Over here!" A lantern's glow flickered through the trees. They ducked beneath cypress roots, the water cold around their waists. Miriam's teeth chattered. Levi pressed a finger to his lips. Silence fell, except for the faint slosh of boots in the distance. The men passed by, cursing under their breath. "Ain't worth it," one muttered. "Swamp'll eat 'em alive." Their light faded, swallowed by fog. Miriam exhaled shakily. Levi stood still, listening. Then he whispered, "We move at dawn. North." "North?" she asked, voice trembling. "There's a trail. Old smugglers used it back when the river still ran deep. Leads to a crossing. If we reach that, maybe we get free." She nodded, though her face showed no faith. The night dragged on. They took turns keeping watch, swatting mosquitoes, listening to the distant screams from the plantation, the sound of whips, the crackle of torches, vengeance carried out on those who'd had no part in the act. Levi's heart ached with guilt, but he didn't look back. He couldn't. As dawn bled through the cypress, pale light reflecting off the black water, Levi rose. "We go," he said. They moved quietly through the swamp, their feet sinking deep. Birds burst from the trees. Each step took them farther from the place that had broken them. And yet, each step carried the weight of what he'd done. At the swamp's edge, they found a stretch of open field. Beyond it, faint on the horizon, smoke curled from another plantation. Civilization, danger, but also the only path north. Miriam hesitated. "You sure?" Levi looked back once more toward the direction of the mill. In the distance, the air was still stained red with dawn. "Ain't no turning back now." They stepped out from the cover of the trees. The mud clung to their boots. The world smelled of iron and rain. A hawk screamed overhead. And as the light broke over the Mississippi fields, Levi felt the truth settle cold in his chest. He hadn't escaped. He had only begun something much larger, something that would echo far beyond one broken mill. Somewhere behind him, the first horn sounded. The searchers had found the trail again. He didn't run, he walked. Slow, steady, like a man who already knew that history had started following him. By noon, the sun blazed cruel and merciless over the delta. The swamp faded behind them, replaced by open fields that shimmered like a mirage. Every step left a print in the mud, a trail Levi knew wouldn't stay hidden long. The sound of cicadas filled the air, endless, suffocating. Miriam stumbled, clutching her side. "Levi, I can't, my legs." He caught her before she fell. Just a little more. There's a creek up ahead. We'll rest." They crawled under the shade of a gnarled oak, the air thick with the smell of water and rot. Levi dipped his hands in the creek and splashed his face, feeling the sting of the coolness against the burns he hadn't realized he carried. His reflection stared back. A face caked with soot, eyes that no longer blinked in fear. Miriam leaned against the trunk, breathing hard. "They'll never stop," she whispered. "They'll hunt you till they got something to hang." Levi's voice was low. "Then I'll give 'em something they can't hang." She frowned. "What does that mean?" But he didn't answer. His mind was elsewhere, on the plantation, on the men who'd built their fortunes grinding other men into dust. He could still see the faces of the field hands that morning, confusion turning to terror as the gears exploded. He hadn't meant to kill them, but now that he had, something in him had shifted. He wasn't just running anymore. He was planning. In the distance, faint smoke rose from the next plantation, the sound of hammers and chains carried on the wind. Levi stood, eyes narrowing. "They got another mill running out there. You hear it?" Miriam stared at him, pale. "Don't even think about it." But Levi already was. The rhythm of the distant machinery was like a heartbeat, steady, mocking, alive. Every one of those wheels turns because someone like me keeps it alive. Every gear grinds because we bleed for it. Miriam's voice trembled. "Levi, you broke one heart already. Don't start another war." He looked down at her, eyes hard. "War started long before me. I just made the first noise loud enough for them to hear." For hours they followed the creek north. The woods thinned, giving way to flat stretches of cane and cotton. Every so often they'd hide as riders passed along the distant road, men with rifles slung across their backs, dogs sniffing, searching. By dusk they reached a cluster of shacks, abandoned, falling apart, their windows black and empty. Levi pushed one open. Inside, dust swirled in beams of orange light, old tools rusted in corners, a forgotten millstone lying cracked beside a broken door. "This'll do," Levi said quietly. They built a fire, small and smokeless. Miriam watched him from the shadows. "You ain't the same man I knew before that night." Levi stared into the flames. "Maybe that's what it takes to break the world that broke you." She said nothing. The firelight flickered over her face, fear and sorrow mixed with something else, understanding. Outside, thunder rumbled again, far away, rolling slow over the fields. Levi looked up, remembering the night it all began, the way the gears had screamed before dying. That sound still lived inside his skull. He turned to her. "You ever think maybe the land remembers?" "What?" she asked softly. "All of it, the sweat, the blood, the cries. Maybe that's why the rain comes so heavy here. Maybe it's trying to wash us clean, but the ground won't let it." Miriam's eyes glistened. "Then what are you going to do when it comes again?" Levi poked the fire, his face calm but unreadable. "When the storm comes back, I won't hide." A silence fell between them, thick, heavy. The fire hissed in the damp air. Then, faintly, they heard it again, the distant creak of machinery turning. Another mill, another plantation, another cage of men. Levi's expression hardened. "Tomorrow," he said. "We move before dawn." Miriam's voice cracked. "To where?" He looked toward the horizon where lightning flashed faintly. To the next heart still beating. The night swallowed their words, leaving only the whisper of rain against the broken roof. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see whether the man who broke one mill would dare to break another. The next morning came pale and gray. Mist crawled over the ground like a living thing, swallowing the fields and muffling every sound. Levi and Miriam moved silently through it, their clothes damp, their steps cautious. Every bird call made them flinch. Every branch crack sounded like a rifle being cocked. Ahead, through the fog, the outline of the new mill rose, larger, prouder, crueler than the last. Its tall smokestack pierced the morning sky, belching black soot into the clouds. Dozens of enslaved workers were already at their stations, sweat gleaming on their backs though the sun hadn't yet burned through. Overseers on horseback circled the grounds, their whips coiled but ready. Miriam whispered, "Levi, we can't do this again. You'll die this time." He didn't look at her. His eyes fixed on the turning gears, on the pulleys that groaned beneath the weight of the cane. "Die doing what, Miriam? Watching it happen? Watching them grind us down till there's nothing left?" She shook her head, tears cutting through the soot on her cheeks. "You can't save them all." Levi's voice was quiet but firm. "Maybe not. But I can make the ground shake again." They waited until dusk. When the overseers left for supper, the night shift took over, men half dead with exhaustion, their faces hollowed by hunger. Levi crept closer, slipping between wagons and shadows. He moved like someone born to vanish. He found the gear housing behind the main engine, metal still warm from the day's fire, the same design as the last mill, the same weakness. He pulled from his pocket a small scrap of metal, a shard from the explosion that had killed the first machine. He turned it in his hand, its edges catching the moonlight. "This one dies quieter," he murmured. Miriam's whisper trembled behind him. "Please, Levi, no more blood." He paused, then looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were wide, pleading, full of the pain he'd planted there himself. "You said they'd kill everyone," he said softly. "You were right. They did." She stared at him in horror. "You saw." Levi nodded once. The field behind the smoke, bodies. They called it punishment. His jaw tightened. They called it order. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the grind of the gears and the low moans of men inside. Miriam's voice broke. "Then this won't stop them, Levi. It'll make them hunt harder." He slid the shard into the heart of the gear assembly. "Then let 'em hunt a ghost." The machine groaned, its rhythm shifting just slightly, like a beast sensing the knife in its side. Levi backed away, taking Miriam's hand. "We go now." They slipped into the cane fields as the first clatter echoed behind them. The gear caught, metal grinding against metal. A faint shriek cut through the night, then a roar. The engine bucked, belts snapped. The great wheels shuddered and split. A blast of steam erupted, lighting the fields with ghostly white fire. Men shouted, horses screamed, bells rang from the manor house. The sky turned red with flame again, as though the night itself had remembered. Levi pulled Miriam through the stalks, smoke curling around them. "Keep moving!" he yelled. Behind them, the second mill tore itself apart. The same sound, the same death rattle, but louder, angrier, defiant. When they finally stopped, miles away, the world was silent except for the crackle of distant fire. Miriam collapsed in the grass, sobbing. "You've damned us both," she cried. "There's nowhere left to go." Levi knelt beside her, his chest heaving. His hands were black with oil and blood. "There's always somewhere left," he said. She glared at him. "You think this is freedom?" He looked toward the horizon, where the smoke from two dead mills merged into one dark column reaching for heaven. "No," he said quietly. "But it's a start." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of ash across the fields. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, a call not for worship, but for warning. Levi sat in silence, listening. Each chime sounded like a heartbeat. 2 mills gone. The Delta was starting to notice. Morning came red and bitter. The smoke from the second mill still clung to the air, drifting over the river like a shroud. Word spread fast, faster than the flames. 2 mills gone, 2 plantations crippled, 2 masters dead, and somewhere between them a whisper of a name, Levi. By midday, the governor's riders were on the move. Posters were nailed to trees. "Runaway. Dangerous. Wanted for murder and destruction of property." The bounty was enough to make poor men rich and cruel men eager. Dogs were unleashed, rifles loaded. The hunt had begun. Levi and Miriam crossed a flooded meadow, their shoes long gone, their feet torn and blistered. The mud sucked at their ankles, each step a battle. The sun beat down mercilessly. Miriam's voice was barely a whisper. "They'll find us, Levi. It's only a matter of time." Levi stopped, staring across the flat horizon where the sky bled into earth. "Then I'll make that time worth something." She stared at him, trembling. "Worth what? More fire? More death?" He turned toward her, his eyes tired but burning. "You think they'll stop when they catch me? They'll make me an example. Hang me where everyone can see. But if I keep going, if they start fearing the sound of their own machines, then maybe they'll think before lighting another torch." Her voice cracked. "And how many of us die before they start thinking?" Levi said nothing. The silence between them was heavier than the heat. By nightfall they reached the river, a wide, slow-moving vein of black water cutting through the heart of the delta. The far bank was wild country, swamps, hills, rumors of free soil beyond. But the river was treacherous, swollen from the week's rain. Levi looked across, calculating. "We'll need a boat." They found a flat-bottomed skiff moored near a half-burned dock. He tested the ropes, listening to the night. Crickets sang, frogs croaked. Somewhere upstream, voices carried faintly. Miriam's fingers dug into his sleeve. "They're close." Levi helped her into the boat. "Quiet now. Don't move till I say." The oars dipped silently into the dark water. Each pull was agony in his arms, every ripple a risk. The moon hid behind clouds, and the world turned to shadow. Halfway across the sound came, a hound barking from the far bank they'd left behind. Then another. Then the flash of lanterns. Miriam gasped. "They see us!" Levi rowed harder. The current fought him, twisting the boat sideways. "Hold on!" Gunfire cracked across the river. Water splashed inches from his face. He ducked low, gripping the oars tighter. Another shot tore through the wood near Miriam's leg. She screamed. He snarled, rowing with everything he had. The boat lurched, scraping against something beneath the surface. A log? A root? Then it caught and flipped, throwing them both into the icy dark. The water closed over Levi's head. He kicked, fighting the pull of the current. The world became bubbles and panic and black. He surfaced, gasping. "Miriam!" No answer. Just the sound of rushing water and shouts from the far shore. He spun wildly, eyes searching. A shape broke the surface ahead. Her hand, barely visible. He lunged forward, caught her wrist and pulled her close. "Hold on," he yelled, though the river swallowed the words. They drifted, carried downstream. The gunfire faded. The lanterns disappeared. The only sound left was the river's endless rush, cold and merciless. Hours later, Levi crawled onto the muddy bank, dragging Miriam with him. She lay still for a long moment before coughing up water and gasping for air. He collapsed beside her, trembling. "You still with me?" Her voice was weak, raw. "I don't know anymore." Levi looked up. The sky had begun to lighten, dawn creeping in pale over the horizon. The river glimmered faintly like a blade catching light. "We crossed," he whispered. "We're out." Miriam turned her head toward him, her eyes hollow. "Out of what, Levi? The river don't wash away ghosts." He looked at his hands, shaking, scarred, covered in black silt. "Maybe not," he said softly, "but it can bury him." Somewhere behind them, far on the other shore, the hounds were still barking, but the sound was faint now, like the echo of another life. Levi lay back in the mud, staring up at the endless gray sky. He knew he hadn't escaped justice. He'd just crossed into its shadow. And as the sun rose over the Mississippi, he whispered to himself, almost like a vow, "They can build 1,000 more mills. I'll break every one." The river had spared them, but it took everything else. The boat was gone, their food was gone, and the cold had settled into their bones. Morning broke weakly over a land that looked the same but somehow felt different, darker, quieter, as if holding its breath. Levi stood on the bank, clothes dripping, eyes scanning the horizon. Trees stretched for miles, gray and skeletal, their branches heavy with moss. Somewhere out there, beyond the veil of swamp and fog, was freedom, or something like it. Miriam sat in the mud, too exhausted to move. Her voice was hoarse. "We ain't free, Levi. We're fugitives." He crouched beside her. "Ain't much difference. Both still running." She looked up at him, her face hollow. "You don't even see what you've done, do you? You didn't just break a mill, you broke the world that held it up." Levi's gaze hardened. "Then let it fall." They walked for hours through the wet, tangled woods. Every root felt like a trap. Every shadow seemed to follow. The storm had passed, but the air still smelled of rain and smoke. Somewhere far behind them, they could almost hear the echo of hammers rebuilding, as if the world refused to stay broken. By midday, they reached a clearing, a small settlement of freedmen half hidden in the trees. Smoke rose from cook fires. Children played in the mud. The people looked up as Levi and Miriam emerged from the forest, soaked, ragged, and silent. An old man approached, leaning on a cane. His eyes were sharp despite his age. "You two look like ghosts." Levi nodded once. "Maybe we are." The old man studied him. "Where you come from?" "South," Levi said quietly. "The sugar fields." A murmur ran through the crowd. A woman whispered, "You from the place that burned?" Levi didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence that followed said enough. The old man motioned for them to sit by the fire. "Word traveled fast," he said. "They say a slave turned the master's mill against him. They say he made the gears scream." Levi stared into the flames. "They make it sound like a story." The old man nodded slowly. "Every story starts with a man who won't kneel no more." Miriam spoke softly. "They're hunting him." The old man chuckled. "They're always hunting someone. But you safe here, for a while." Levi looked around at the people. Faces marked by scars and hard years, but eyes full of something he hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. It unsettled him. That night they ate for the first time in days. Miriam laughed quietly with the children, but Levi stayed apart, sharpening a rusted knife with a stone. His mind wandered back to the mills, to the sound of breaking metal, to the way the fire had danced on the horizon like a promise. The old man sat beside him. "You done something big," he said. "Something they'll talk about long after we're gone. But you got to understand, boy. Freedom built on blood don't hold steady. You got to teach it to live." Levi kept his eyes on the blade. "They don't understand any other language." The old man sighed. "Then you make sure they listen to thine right words next time." Later, as the fire burned low, Miriam found Levi standing at the edge of the camp, staring into the trees. "You're thinking about going," she said quietly. He didn't turn. "They'll come this way. I can't bring that here." Miriam stepped closer, her voice trembling. "And what happens when you run out of places to burn?" Levi said nothing. His eyes traced the horizon, where lightning flickered faintly, too far to hear, but close enough to promise another storm. He whispered, almost to himself, "Then I stop running." Miriam closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "And what will you do then?" Levi's hand tightened on the knife. "Make sure they remember why the mills went silent." Somewhere deep in the forest, a dog barked. Distant, but getting closer. The night wind carried the sound of horses on the road. Levi took one last look at the firelight behind him, the warmth, the laughter, the fragile peace, and then he turned away from it. As he stepped into the darkness, the old man's voice followed him softly. "Don't let the fire you started eat you too, son." Levi didn't answer. The trees swallowed him whole, and the sound of his footsteps faded into the rhythm of the crickets and the whispering river. The hunt was moving north again. Dawn came thin and gray over the swamp. Mist coiled low along the water, curling around the roots of cypress trees like ghostly fingers. Levi moved silently through it, every step sinking into the mud. Behind him, the faint echo of hoofbeats carried from miles away. The dogs had picked up the scent again. He stopped to listen, breathing steady, eyes narrowed. Somewhere behind the fog, men shouted to one another, their voices hard and confident. They thought they knew the land. They didn't. Levi had worked it, bled into it. The swamp was his now. He moved deeper, crossing shallow water where frogs alone ebbed away from his boots. The air smelled of rot and pine. He could hear the mosquitoes hum. Every sound mattered. Every ripple, every snapped twig told a story, and Levi knew how to listen. By midday, he found the remnants of an old ferry dock. Half-rotted boards, a rusted chain, a few forgotten barrels. He tore one open with his knife. Inside was a handful of gunpowder wrapped in oilcloth, damp but usable. He smiled faintly. The land provided for those who weren't afraid to dig into its bones. He worked quietly, setting traps, rope from roots, nails from old planks. He remembered the way the mill gears had sounded when they jammed, metal grinding, screaming, breaking, and he thought maybe the same rules applied here: pressure, timing, silence before the break. By the time the first horse broke through the trees, Levi was gone from sight. Hidden in the underbrush, he watched as two riders came into view. Overseer men, armed and angry. They dismounted, muttering. One of them kicked the water in frustration. "He can't be far. He's just a man, not a ghost." The other spat. "Tell that to the ones who found what he did to the mill." They walked forward. One stepped on a patch of reeds that sank too easily. There was a click, then a violent snap as the trap triggered, a sharpened branch whipping upward. The man screamed, fell back clutching his leg. Blood spread fast in the water. The second man panicked, raising his rifle, firing blindly into the mist. The shots echoed, then faded. Nothing answered. Levi waited until silence returned. Then, from behind the trees, his voice drifted low and steady. "You think you own the land, but it's already turned on you." The uninjured man spun around. "Show yourself." Levi stepped from the mist, eyes hard, knife glinting faintly in the weak light. He said nothing more. The man hesitated, just long enough. Levi moved fast, a blur of motion. The fight was brief, ugly, silent. When it ended, the swamp reclaimed what was left. Levi wiped his knife clean and moved on. His hands shook only slightly. He wasn't killing for rag. He was surviving, methodical, quiet, almost cold. By nightfall, he reached higher ground. Through the trees, he could see a flicker of orange light. Torches. A search party. Maybe 10 men. More organized this time. Dogs barking, men calling orders. They were spreading out. Levi crouched low, listening. One of the men shouted, "The governor wants him alive. That slave started a rebellion." Rebellion. The word hit Levi like a wave. He hadn't thought of it that way. He wasn't leading anyone. He was just breaking what was already broken. But the word stuck. It gave shape to something he hadn't dared to name. He whispered it under his breath, almost tasting it. Rebellion. The torches moved closer. He could see their faces now, nervous, sweating, trying to stay brave in a land that hated them as much as he did. Levi's heart pounded, but not from fear, from purpose. He reached into his pocket and felt the damp powder he'd saved. Enough for one explosion if he was careful. He looked at the old ferry dock again, then at the barrels still half buried in mud. An idea flickered, a plan born of fire and desperation. The men came into the clearing, voices overlapping, rifles raised. The dogs howled. And then, a sudden roar, a flash of fire. The dock erupted, wood splintering, flames leaping into the air. Men screamed, scattering. The swamp lit up like judgment itself. Levi moved through the chaos, unseen. Smoke wrapped around him like a cloak. When the fire dimmed, he was gone again, deeper into the trees. Behind him, the flames licked at the night sky, reflected in the dark waters of the river. The men would live, but the message would burn deeper than their wounds. Levi didn't look back. He walked until the fire was nothing but a glow on the horizon. For the first time, he didn't feel hunted. He felt inevitable. Morning broke with the smell of ash drifting through the cypress trees. The swamp still whispered from the fire, steam rising from blackened reeds and cracked mud. Somewhere behind the haze, the search parties regrouped. They were quieter now, more cautious. Fear had crawled into their ranks. They'd seen what one man could do when cornered by injustice. Levi sat near a fallen log, his shirt torn, hands trembling faintly as he cleaned a shallow cut across his arm. The smoke had found his lungs, leaving his breathing slow and rough. He wasn't running anymore, not out of fear. Now, every step was chosen. Every sound meant something. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a charred gear tooth, a fragment of the mill's heart. It had been part of the machine that crushed hundreds of pounds of sugarcane every day, powered by human suffering. He turned it over in his palm, its edges jagged and blackened. That machine was gone now, and for the first time in his life, Levi felt that maybe the world could stop turning too, if only for a moment. Footsteps approached in the distance. Not many this time. 2, maybe 3. The voices were softer, different accents. Not the overseer's men. He crouched low, waiting. Through the fog he saw them. 2 young men in plain clothes and a woman with a bandaged hand. They weren't carrying rifles. They carried a lantern, low and careful. When they spoke, it was in hushed tones. "He's the one they call Levi, the mill breaker." Levi stepped out slowly, hand near his knife but not drawn. "Who are you?" The woman raised the lantern. "Friends, we heard what you did, the others. They're still trapped. Some are planning to run. You gave them hope." He frowned. "Hope?" He almost laughed, but the sound came out tired. "I wasn't giving anything. I just broke what needed breaking." The woman nodded. "Sometimes that's all hope needs." They led him deeper into the woods, to a hidden camp beside the river, a place where the night hid whispers and the day revealed nothing. There were 6 men and women there, all fugitives, some from nearby plantations, others escaped from towns along the river. They looked at Levi with something between awe and fear. One man stepped forward, tall and scarred, voice low. "We heard about the mill. We heard it screamed before it died." Levi didn't answer. The man continued. "You showed us the machine can bleed, that they ain't untouchable." Levi sat beside the fire. "They'll come harder now, with soldiers, hounds, torches. They'll burn every inch of this place." The tall man nodded. "Then we move before they do." They began to plan, tracing lines in the dirt with sticks. Routes through the bayou. Safe houses along the river. Names of men who might help. Each voice carried quiet fury, the kind born from lifetimes of silence. Levi listened more than he spoke. But when he did, the room fell still. "If we strike again, it can't just be anger. It has to mean something. It has to stop the work itself." The woman looked at him. "You want to stop the mills?" He nodded slowly. "Every last one." Night fell hard again, and with it came the feeling that something larger had begun. What had started as one man's act of defiance was becoming a movement, a whisper that carried downriver, past plantations, past towns, past fear. They sat around the fire, silent, listening to the river breathe. Somewhere, an owl called out, its sound sharp and lonely. Levi stared into the flames, the reflection dancing across his eyes. He remembered the overseer's face, the sound of the gears locking, the cries from the mill that night, and he realized something unsettling. He hadn't just broken the machine. He had awakened something in himself, something that couldn't be unmade. The woman noticed his silence. "You don't have to lead us," she said softly. "You already did." Levi didn't answer. The night didn't need his words. The air itself carried them, heavy with promise and consequence. Far away across the dark water, the first bell of the morning shift began to ring at another mill. Its sound drifted faintly through the mist, rhythmic, mechanical, unfeeling. Levi looked toward it, his jaw tightening. The woman whispered, "Tomorrow?" He nodded once. "Tomorrow." The fire cracked softly. The night closed in again, heavy with purpose. And in that darkness, the rebellion began to breathe. By the next dusk, the river had turned red with the reflection of firelight. Not from the mill this time, but from the torches of men searching for vengeance. The governor's orders had reached every corner of the county. Find the slave named Levi. Kill him if you must. Burn everything he touched. Word of the bounty spread fast. Thousands of dollars for his capture. To the masters, he was no longer a man. He was a contagion, a whisper that could spread freedom like wildfire. But Levi was already moving. He and the others broke camp before sunrise, carrying only what they needed. Flint, dry cornmeal, one old pistol. The air was thick with the smell of mud and gunpowder. The river was swollen from rain, heavy and fast, like it knew what was coming. The group moved along the riverbank, silent except for the soft splash of feet in the shallows. Every mile, Levi marked the land in his mind, the bend in the trees, the rise in the earth. He wasn't running, he was mapping, planning. Every step was a chess piece. Behind them, the sound of hounds broke through the fog. The woman, Ruth, whispered, "They're closer." Levi glanced back. The torches looked like a trail of small suns in the distance, weaving through the swamp. "Then we go deeper," he said. They turned off the trail, cutting through knee-high water and reeds. The swamp closed around them like a living thing. The smell of decay thickened. Mosquitoes swarmed, but Levi's eyes stayed forward, locked on the faint glimmer of something in the distance. A derelict sugar house, long abandoned, its roof half collapsed. They reached it just as the last light faded. Inside, the air was cold and damp. Rusted machinery loomed like skeletons of the old world. Levi ran his hand over one of the iron rollers, its teeth dulled by time, but its purpose still clear. He could almost hear it screaming again, like the one he'd broken weeks ago. The tall man, Jacob, looked around nervously. "This place'll get us killed." Levi's eyes didn't leave the roller. "No," he said softly. "It'll set us free." He explained the plan with calm precision. The pursuers would follow their scent here. When they entered, the group would already be hidden in the rafters and shadows. The old machinery, heavy, rusted but still dangerous, would do the rest. Ruth stared at him. "You mean to kill them?" Levi met her eyes. "I mean to stop them." Hours passed. Rain began to fall again, steady and soft. The sound of dogs grew louder, nearer. Then came the crunch of boots outside, the sharp call of a man's voice. "Fan out! Check every inch!" The doors creaked open. Light poured in from their torches. The air shimmered with dust and fear. Levi held his breath as the first soldier stepped inside, rifle raised. The man looked around at the shadows of the old machines. "This place stinks of death," he muttered. Another followed. Then another. Soon 6 men were inside, eyes darting, fingers tight on triggers. One of them kicked a gear on the floor. It clattered across the stones. The sound echoed like thunder. From above, Levi moved his hand slowly toward the rope he'd rigged. He looked once at Ruth, her face pale in the dim light. She nodded. The rope tightened. The old roller shifted, groaned. Metal studs screamed. Then it fell. The crash shook the whole structure. Sparks burst as the lanterns hit the floor. The air filled with flame and smoke. The men shouted, scrambled for the exit, but the heavy door, swollen by rain and warped with rust, didn't budge. Levi and the others leapt from the rafters, grabbing their chance. The fight was brutal, short, chaotic. The crack of gunfire echoed through the walls. When it was over, the sugar house was burning. Levi stood in the doorway, chest heaving, rain steaming off his skin. Behind him, the fire devoured the machines, the gears twisting and melting like wax. Ruth staggered beside him, eyes wide. "They'll call this war," she whispered. Levi looked out into the night where more torches glowed far off through the rain. "It already is." The fire's glow reached up to the clouds, red and alive. For miles, men would see it and whisper his name. Levi of Mississippi, the slave who broke the mills, the man who made the river burn. The rain couldn't put the fire out that night. It only carried the smoke further, north, east, west, like a signal. And in that smoke, history began to shift. By the time morning arrived, the sky over the Mississippi Delta looked bruised, purple clouds torn by streaks of gray smoke. The sugar house had burned through the night. Charred beams still hissed as they cooled, sinking into black mud. Crows circled above the ruin, their cries sharp and metallic. From miles away, plantation bells rang out, not for work, but warning. Levi's name had become thunder rolling through the fields. Overseers barked orders. Masters whispered behind shutters. The word was spreading faster than fire. He's still alive. Levi moved through the trees with Ruth and Jacob, every branch dripping from the night's rain. His hands were raw, his voice a rasp. None of them had slept. The smoke followed them like a curse. Ruth broke the silence first. They'll bring soldiers next, not just hunting parties, the kind that carry flags." Levi nodded. "Then we make them see what they've built." Jacob frowned. "What's that mean?" Levi stopped walking. His voice was quiet, steady. "It means they'll watch their own machine eat itself." They crossed an open stretch of cane fields, black from ash. In the distance, the main plantation loomed again. The big house, pale and perfect, sitting above rows of ruin. It was the heart of everything he hated. Levi stared at it for a long time. The rain softened to mist hanging in the air like breath. He turned to the others. "We go back tonight." Ruth's eyes widened. "Back? Levi, that's suicide." He didn't answer. His silence was its own kind of fire. As dusk fell, the fields came alive with motion, lanterns bobbing, men patrolling, dogs pacing. The smell of fear and sweat drifted across the land. The masters expected him to run, to hide deeper in the swamp. They never imagined he'd return. From the cover of trees, Levi watched the mill yard, its wreckage still smoking. The gears were twisted, useless. The overseer's house stood dark and quiet, and at the edge of it all the mansion's windows glowed faintly, golden light spilling through lace curtains. Inside that light, power slept easy. Levi knelt in the dirt. His hands trembled slightly as he opened a small pouch Ruth had carried since the swamp. Inside were the remnants of the powder from the old barrels, damp, clumped, but still potent. Enough for one more spark. Jacob crouched beside him. If we light that, they'll burn everything. You know that, right? Levi looked up at the mansion, the mill, the rows of quarters stretching beyond. They already burned everything. I'm just showing them the ashes. He rose, moving quietly across the open yard, the rain whispering against his skin. Ruth and Jacob followed, their steps careful but determined. When they reached the old gear shed, Levi stopped and listened. The night pulsed with the sound of crickets and distant thunder. Inside the shed he found what he needed, oil lamps, rags, and the dry husk of the last mill cart. He soaked the rags in oil, twisted them tight, and wrapped them around the wooden wheel spokes. Then he touched the powder to the oil, forming a trail that led like a fuse across the ground toward the main storage barn, where barrels of molasses waited, thick and heavy as blood. Ruth's voice shook. Levi, once it starts. I know. He met her eyes. That's the point. They waited until the moon hid behind clouds. Then Levi struck the flint. The spark caught fast, eating its way down the black line of oil, a tiny serpent of light. The barn went first. A roar, then a blast that threw sugar and smoke into the air. The fire moved like it knew where to go, jumping from roof to roof, licking the night with orange tongues. Workers stumbled from their quarters, shouting. Bells clanged. The overseer ran into the yard, half-dressed, pistol shaking in his hand. He shouted Levi's name, voice cracking, but there was no answer. Levi stood in the glow, watching the mill, the same mill that had crushed men's bodies, broken families, fed empires, collapse into itself. The iron screamed as it melted. Sparks rose like stars carried by the wind. Ruth clutched his arm. We have to go. Levi nodded slowly, but his eyes never left the flames. Let it breathe. Behind them, the mansion's windows shattered from the heat. Curtains caught fire. The great wheel that once turned the mill cracked down the middle and fell into the dirt with a sound like judgment. As they fled toward the trees, Levi turned once more to see the fire swallow the house. The rain came down harder, hissing against the blaze, but it couldn't kill it. For the first time, the plantation was silent. No bells, no orders, no machines, just the sound of rain on fire and the soft rhythm of footsteps disappearing into the swam. Levi whispered under his breath, barely audible through the storm. The heart's gone cold, and for that night, the Delta truly stopped breathing. By dawn, the Mississippi Delta was nothing but smoke. The air was thick and bitter, stinging the lungs, coating the world in gray. What had once been a glittering sugar kingdom was now a graveyard of ash and iron. The great wheel lay split in the mud, half submerged like a relic from a dying god. Even the birds had fled. Levi stood at the edge of the swamp, soaked and silent. His face was streaked with soot, eyes hollow but burning with something deeper than exhaustion. Ruth stood beside him, her hands trembling as she looked back toward the horizon. The mansion was gone, nothing but a skeletal frame against the rising sun. Jacob broke the silence first. They'll come, Levi. Soldiers, bounty men, maybe even the army. You gave them war. Levi didn't look at him. Then let them come. I'm done hiding. The words hung in the damp air like prophecy. They walked deeper into the cypress grove where others waited, men and women who had escaped in the chaos of the fire. Children clung to their mothers, faces smudged with soot. Fear lingered, but so did something else, defiance. For the first time, the overseer's voices weren't echoing through the morning. For the first time, the people spoke freely. A young man stepped forward, his hands still shaking. They said you burned it all, Levi. The mill, the house, everything. Is it true? Levi met his gaze. It was already burning. I just gave it a match. Whispers spread through the crowd. Some crossed themselves. Others smiled faintly. Ruth turned toward him. They'll call it rebellion now. They'll hang anyone they think helped you. Levi nodded slowly. Then the truth will hang with us. He knelt, drawing a rough map in the wet earth with a stick. Rivers, roads, the line too. Halt led north toward freedom. Some of you can make it, he said. Follow the river, stay to the shadows. Find the men who run the boats. Tell them the mills are dead. Tell them it's time. Jacob frowned. And you? Levi looked out over the smoke-filled horizon. I stay. Ruth's eyes widened. No. You've done enough. You can still make it out. He shook his head. They built this place on my back. They'll see it fall by my hands. The others understood. They didn't argue. Some wept quietly. Others simply nodded and began to pack what little they had. As the morning wore on, the first sound of hooves reached them, distant but growing. Levi's jaw tightened. The hunt had begun again. He turned to Ruth. Take them north. Don't stop until the air feels light. She hesitated, then pressed something into his hand, a small carved cross made from cane wood. For when it gets dark again, she whispered. Levi closed his fist around it. It's already dark. The group moved out, fading into the trees like ghosts. Levi watched them go until the last shadow disappeared, then turned back toward the ruins. Smoke curled upward, mixing with fog until the line between earth and sky vanished. By midday, soldiers arrived at the edge of the field, uniforms gleaming, rifles ready, faces hard. At their center rode a man in a gray coat with a gold badge on his chest, the governor's marshal. His voice was cold as iron. Bring him in alive if you can. I want the people to see him hang. Levi watched from the tree line as they spread out, methodical, efficient. He knew their kind, men who'd never felt the whip, never heard the gears scream. He waited until one broke formation, straying too far. Then the swamp swallowed him whole. Gunfire cracked through the trees. Birds scattered. The soldiers shouted, stumbling through mud. Levi moved like a shadow, using every root and fallen trunk as cover. The swamp was his ally now, and he fought like it had blood to avenge. By evening the field was a haze of smoke and confusion. Half the soldiers were gone, their tracks lost in the May. Ugh! The marshal stood alone near the riverbank, cursing into the wind. A voice came from behind him, low and steady. You built your world on chains. The marshal turned, hand on his revolver, but Levi was already there. His face was calm, his knife steady. You thought it would last forever, Levi said. You thought men couldn't break. The marshal sneered. You think burning a few mills will change the world? You're just another slave who forgot his place. Levi stepped closer, eyes unblinking. No, I remembered it too well. The wind rose, carrying the smell of burnt sugar and rain. The two men stood face to face, one built by power, the other by pain. What happened next, no one saw clearly. Some said there was a struggle. Others swore they saw the marshal's body float downriver by dawn. All that remained was Levi's footprints in the mud, leading back into the swamp. And in the distance, the sound of gears turning no more. The river ran high and red that morning, swollen with mud and memory. Ash floated on its surface like dying petals. The smoke from the burned plantation drifted for miles, curling around the bayous and choking the sky. Every town along the water whispered the same name now. Levi. Some called him a killer. Others called him a savior. But all agreed. He had done the impossible. He had made the great mills stop. Levi moved like a ghost through the wet dawn, clothes torn, body marked with cuts and soot. Each breath was shallow but steady. Behind him, the marsh swallowed his tracks. He could hear the soldiers in the distance, still searching, still shouting his name like a curse. They didn't understand that the man they hunted was already part of the land itself. He crossed a narrow stretch of reeds where the water mirrored the blood-red sky. The world was silent except for the slow drip of rain off cypress roots. Every step forward felt hero. Veer. But Levi didn't stop. The mission wasn't escape. It was message. Up ahead, a lone church sat on a small rise, half sunken into the mud. The bell was gone, the windows boarded, but someone had been there recently. Smoke rose faintly from its chimney. Levi approached with caution, hand resting on his knife. Inside, the church was dim and hollow. A handful of candles flickered near the altar. An old preacher sat there, his back straight despite the years. He turned when Levi entered, eyes steady and unafraid. I knew you'd come, the preacher said softly. His voice carried the weight of sermons whispered over graves. "Been hearing your name on the wind, the boy who broke the gears." Levi stood silent, dripping water onto the floor. The preacher nodded slowly. "You did what no one else would, but they'll come for you, son. They'll call it justice." Levi's voice was low. "It ain't justice they want. It's silence." The preacher studied him, then reached behind the altar, pulling out a weathered journal. "There was a man here once before you were born. Said the same thing. Said the Lord made the river wide so a man could choose which side to die on." Levi's eyes flickered to the journal. "What happened to him?" The preacher smiled faintly. "He crossed." Levi looked out the broken window. The river glimmered beyond the trees. "Then that's where I'll go." The preacher rose, laying a hand on Levi's shoulder. "If you cross that water, you don't come back. You'll vanish into story. You ready for that?" Levi met his eyes. "I've been ready since the mill screamed." The preacher's gaze softened. "Then let me give you a name they can't erase." He dipped his finger into the candle wax and drew a small mark on Levi's forehead. A cross. "Not the name they gave you in bondage. The one you earned in fire. Levi of Mississippi." Outside, thunder rolled over the water. Levi left without another word. The preacher watched him disappear into the rain, whispering a prayer that would outlive both of them. At the river's edge, Levi found an old ferry boat half buried in reeds. Its boards were slick with moss, its ropes frayed, but it floated. He pushed it into the current, the sound of the water rising like breath. As he drifted away, he looked back one last time. The plantation lands were nothing but smoke and ruin. The empire of sugar had fallen silent. On the far bank, a figure appeared, a young boy, barefoot, staring in awe as the boat neared. He'd heard the stories too. He whispered the name under his breath like a prayer. "Levi." Levi stepped onto the shore, the mud cold under his feet. For the first time in his life, he felt the ground that no master had claimed. Freedom didn't sing. It breathed, quiet and deep. He turned to the boy. "What's your name?" "Samuel," the boy said. "They burned my mama's cabin. Said it was 'cause of you." Levi knelt, looking him in the eye. "Then you remember this. Don't let them make you small again. The machine don't run if the hands won't move." The boy nodded, tears cutting through the dirt on his face. Levi stood, staring north. The clouds were thinning now, sunlight fighting through. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the river curved toward places where no chains clinked, no overseer's whip cracked. He started walking. Each step was slow, deliberate, like he was carving his own name into the earth. The pain in his ribs burned, but he didn't falter. The world had taken everything from him, and yet, here he was. Behind him, the preacher's bell-less church stood in the mist, its candles still burning. Ahead, the river whispered its promise. And somewhere between those two silences, Levi became a legend. The year the mill died became the year the Delta learned to whisper differently. The smoke had long cleared, the ashes buried beneath new cane, but the story, Levi's story, refused to fade. In every field, in every shanty, his name passed in low voices like a forbidden hymn. Children carved his mark into tree trunks. Elders swore they'd seen him on foggy mornings by the